Are you new to teaching elementary music, or do you feel like you're just spinning your wheels every day in your classroom? Maybe you're overwhelmed and honestly just don't know where to go for advice and mentorship. Hi, I'm Jessica, and when I'm not drinking all the coffee, watching Razorback sports, or hanging out with my family of boys, it's my passion to help elementary music teachers just like you teach your students by using your unique personality and teaching style. In this podcast, you'll find helpful tips, strategies, and ideas that will help you kick that stress to the curb and begin teaching music with confidence. Let's get started. Hey, music teacher friend, I hope you're doing well. I want to tell you about something super exciting coming up this summer. On June 22nd, I will be hosting the free 5-day challenge called Start the School Year Off Right Challenge. In this challenge, you're going to learn all about how to start the school year off with success, whether that is going to be virtually or in person, or you're just not even sure what next school year is going to look like yet. On day 2, we're going to talk about work-home life balance, which is something we all need help and support in right now, especially during the time we're living in, I feel. Day 3 is going to be all about how to plan for next school year during the summer. And we'll talk about what your school year will look like and how you can plan to successfully teach next school year, even if it looks a little different than you think it might normally look. Day 4 is going to be all about reflecting on this school year. And oh my goodness, do we have a lot of reflecting to do, right? You had the beginning of the school year started off strong. You were in your classroom, and then you finished off probably the school year teaching virtually. So we're going to reflect on all that together and talk about ways you can move forward with taking what you learned into the next school year. And day 5 is going to be all about why professional development matters, why it's a good thing, how to find good professional development opportunities this summer, and how to find what you need for your particular teaching situation. So I would love for you to join us. The challenge starts on June 22nd, and simply head to subscribepage.com/Music Teacher Challenge 2020, or simply click on the link in the show notes to join us. I cannot wait to see you there. And immediately after joining the challenge, you can join our Facebook group where I will be going live every day in the challenge. And there's so many amazing music teachers in there already a part of the group who are ready to support you and get to know you. So come on in and join us. I can't wait to help you get the forward momentum you need to go into next school year feeling successful. Have an amazing day, and I'll see you soon. Hey there, music teacher friend. Welcome back to the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. You're listening to episode 101. Still so weird for me to say that, by the way. And today we're going to talk about preparing for any situation next school year might throw your way. Right now, as I'm recording this, it is May. And so thinking about next school year might be a little the furthest thing from your mind. And so you're just trying to get through the rest of this school year, whatever your teaching situation may look like right now, and then enjoy the summer the best you can, and then start thinking about going back into the fall. But the reason I wanted to record this episode and have it go out in May is because I don't think it's ever too soon to start thinking about the next school year. First of all, I want you to take a deep breath right now, okay? Because I know that the way teaching has looked like right now is something that we've never seen before. It is really overwhelming, and it's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's okay to feel sad or like you're just not liking the way this school year has looked. It's not the way you had planned. And if you're anything like me, I'm a planner. I like to have a plan and know the way things are going to go and have it all mapped out and lined out. And it's just not going that way this school year. And so first of all, I want to, before I dive into what next school year might look like, and I'm going to go through several different situations, different teaching situations that you might be facing, I want to just say right now that, like I said, it's okay to feel sad or like you're not liking the way next school year is going to look. It's okay to feel uncertain and unsure. It's okay to feel unconfident or like you have no idea what you're doing. It's also okay not to know how to do all the techie things you see so many other teachers doing. And the reason I'm saying it's okay, because if you have not given yourself permission right now to take a deep breath, I want you to do that. I want you to know that the way you're feeling, you're not alone in feeling that way. And no, it's not a matter of feeling sorry for yourself. It's just letting yourself know that, listen, I have never faced this before. I am sad. I'm upset. I'm kind of grieving the way the school year's gone. And I'm a little upset that the fall might look a little weird too. Process your emotions, because if you don't ever process your emotions and the way you're feeling, it's going to cause even more overwhelm than you're already feeling. So do however that looks like for you. Maybe it is just like sitting down for a little bit, writing out your thoughts. How are you feeling if you're a journaler? Maybe it is just thinking about it, thinking and processing your feelings and emotions. And maybe it looks like talking to someone about it and sharing the way you're feeling with others. However it looks like to you, that's completely fine. So whatever camp you find yourself in for next school year, know that having a plan in place for how to tackle any teaching situation that might come your way is so important. Maybe right now you don't even know what the fall is going to look like. From working with music teachers every day, I know several of you have told me that you won't even find out what your teaching situation in the fall is going to look like until the end of June or even July. You have no idea if you're going back to school full time, if it's going to be back to school but only having half class sizes, if you're going to still just be teaching virtually, if you're still going to be sending home paper packets, if you're going to be doing a combination of all the approaches. You're just not sure yet. You're not even sure if you're going to be teaching on a cart or if you'll be able to use your classroom. So many questions in your mind, and we're going to tackle some of those today. I'm going to first of all say I don't have all the answers. I really don't. But I think the best way to help you, and this is the approach I take when helping music teachers with anything, is by helping you process through your thoughts, helping you make a plan of action, because you know your teaching situation, maybe not for the fall yet, but you know your students better than anyone. You know what you're comfortable doing. You know what your plan, you need to make it, because I can't make it for you, because every single teacher and person has a unique personality, unique skill traits, and a unique way of teaching than anyone else. So with that said, I'm going to give you practical things you can do. Okay, these are ideas I've shared before with teachers I work with online, whether it's in my membership site, emails I respond to, direct messages, whatever, a webinar I presented at just this week, actually. These are different ideas that I am sharing all over the place that I want to share with you on the podcast. But my ideas are just my ideas. These are to just kind of give you a jump start in how to help yourself continuing researching and planning for success in the fall. All right, so let's go ahead and just dive right in. First of all, let's go ahead and talk about teaching like you normally would, okay? Let's say you go back to school and you're told that you're just going to have your normal teaching schedule and everything's going to look the same come the fall. Nothing's changing. You get to finally go back and see all your students, have your regular classes come to you, have your regular schedule back. Let's say that that's what they tell you to do in the fall. I don't know if very many of you will find yourself in that situation, but I want to talk about it anyways, because you may end up finding out that that's what they're telling you to do. And awesome. So what do you do? How do you plan for that? Well, you just do anything you've been doing, right? You bust out your lesson plans, you bust out your curriculum map you've been using, and you start planning your lessons like you normally would. You get to start doing movement activities again, instruments, body percussion, speech pieces, singing, rhythm, writing, etc. You get to plan performances like you always have, looking at Music K8 or the resources you already have. I already have a podcast episode about how to plan performances, so go back and listen to that if you did not hear that one. But think about any welcome songs, name games. You get to start planning beginning of the school year activities again, having class discussions with your students again, and talking about, you can even talk to them about what they experienced with virtual teaching if you're in your classroom again. And then you get to start having small and whole group activities again and lots of music making together, which I know everyone's missed tremendously. Also, you need to, the beginning of the school year is when classroom management needs to take place again, reviewing procedures, and it might feel like you're starting over, because if you haven't seen your kiddos in person in a long time, then it's going to be a refresher for everyone, whether you have new students to your school or students who are returning. So when you're looking at your lessons that you taught last year, since it's been a while, and you're like, okay, I don't even remember what I did at the beginning of the school year last year because my brain's been a jumbled mess the past couple months. Then go back and look at your lesson plans. Maybe you haven't been so great about organizing your lessons, and so maybe develop a way to organize your lesson plans. I suggest either doing it by teaching standard or by topics you want to teach. You can organize them on Google Doc. You can organize them in binders. You can organize them any other virtual way that you feel comfortable organizing your lessons. But I always advise teachers to just have a plan to organize your lessons so it's easy to pull from them, whether you're categorizing them by lower and upper elementary, topics, objectives. Having lessons that are easily accessible and easy to pull from is a great way to start the school year off with success if you're back in your classroom. So you're going to have lessons you've printed from various resources, and it can end up being overwhelming because they're kind of like come from so many different places, and you're like, oh my gosh, how do I keep organized with all my lessons? Well, like I said, just take the time to organize everything. And once you do that, it takes work up front, of course, but once you do that, once your lessons are organized and ready to go, they're ready to go out there. They're ready to go throughout the whole school year. Sorry, I'm stumbling over my words a bit. So that is kind of my suggestions there's not a lot of suggestions for starting out the school year again, because I actually have a back to school episode last year that if you want to listen to that, how to start the school year off with success. But this one is about how to teach in the fall, whatever your teaching situation looks like. So we talked about maybe you do find yourself just going back to school regularly. Maybe it's like, okay, they told me I'm just back into the grind of things. Then just get back in the swing of things like you did last year before quarantine and COVID-19 teaching happened. Okay, but let's talk about some of these other situations that you more than likely are going to find yourself in. Okay, so first of all, teaching on a cart. This is something that I've already had some teachers tell me they found out they probably will be doing. So what does that mean? Maybe you're brand new to elementary music, or you have been teaching music, but just in your classroom. So this whole teaching on a cart idea is kind of strange and different. And I understand that completely. If I can be perfectly honest, I have never taught on a cart before, but I have had several conversations with other teachers I've picked their brains before this episode, and they've given me their best strategies for this. So first of all, I've been asked, what do I put on a cart? Well, if you're teaching, if there's going to be some guidelines at your school, like the CDC has placed upon schools, or your administration has told you different things that you need to do in your school building, then you're either going to have instruments or not have instruments. It completely depends on what you're allowed to have, okay? So if you're planning to have instruments on your cart, then I would always suggest having Lysol wipes if they're available, because I know I cannot find those in stores right now, but some way to disinfect the instruments after every single student touches it. So that's a lot of work to keep disinfecting these instruments over and over and over. But my suggestion, which this is not something I want to suggest ever, but is to not do instruments, at least for a while, until things settle down and until you know that it's okay for kiddos to start touching the instruments again. So what can you do instead of instruments? Well, the students can do body percussion. They can do everything they would do on an instrument, they can do on their bodies. If you are going to a classroom, and we'll go back to talking about what to put on your cart in a minute, but I want to talk about this for a second. So if you're teaching on a cart, that obviously means you are rolling a cart to a classroom, okay? So once you get to the classroom, students already are at tables or desks, or however the teacher has them spaced out, okay? So when they're at their desk, then they can completely use their desk as a drum. They can use pencils. They can use their hands to hit the desk. Think about how a desk or a table has the wood part and then the metal part. The chairs sometimes are plastic, and they can, explore the different ways different ways the things that are around them make sounds as well. They can even stomp on the floor. So there's so many different ways you can use body percussion if you're not able to use instruments. So on your cart, let's go back to that for a minute. You're teaching resources. So just like you would look at your schedule at the beginning of a school year and seeing what grade level comes back to back. Like, okay, I'm going to see first grade, and then I go to a third grade class, and then fifth grade. And you guys know as music teachers, it's not usually as simple as fifth, fourth, third, second, first kindergarten, right? It's usually all over the map for some reason, and I don't know. For me, that's how it always has been. Your schedule is kind of like a jumbled mess. So anyways, look at your schedule. Where are you going when, at what part of the day? And then kind of plan accordingly. Maybe have like some sections on your cart for upper and lower elementary, or organize the class periods by order. Like, let's say you are starting with 5th grade and then you go to a second grade class, and then the third class period is 3rd grade. Maybe on the top of your cart, you have 5th, 3rd, and 2nd. I hope I said that right, because I can't remember what I just said before that. I might have said 5th, 2nd, 3rd. And then on the bottom of the cart is the other 3 grade levels you're going to see if you teach K through 5th. Or I've known people have told me that on their cart, they even have like some little buckets hanging off the cart where they put things on there as well. So either way is completely fine. Basically, what I'm trying to get at is develop a way to organize your teaching resources in a way that makes sense to you. Remember, we just talked about organizing your lesson plans, right? We talked, like, if you're going back to teaching like you normally would, we talked about organizing your lesson plans like you're teaching in your regular classroom, in binders, or in online, like a Google Sheet or a Google Doc. I can't talk right now. I can't think of what I was trying to say. But just like you would organize your lesson plans in a normal classroom setting, that is way you're going to organize your teaching resources and lesson plans like on a cart. It basically becomes kind of your like makeshift music classroom in a way. So you have your teaching resources. You kind of look at what grades am I teaching today? What am I going to need to teach these classes? Then you pull out what teaching resources, materials, whatever you need to teach from, and you get it on your cart and you organize it the way that makes sense to you. You're also going to need, like I said, instruments or no instruments, depending on what you're comfortable with and what you're being told to do. And then any kind of teaching manipulatives. I would suggest, if your students are not allowed to touch each other or to touch other things for safety reasons, then when I say teaching manipulatives, you're just using things that you are needing to teach with, not to necessarily hand out. Okay. And then you're also going to need something to play music. Maybe it's a laptop computer. Maybe you don't have access to a laptop computer or even a Chromebook because they're going to be used all over your school. So then you might just need to go really old school and get like a CD player, and maybe just use that for a while. I know that's not ideal, but that might be what you need to do. You might just need to be like creative right now and inventive, because look at how creative you've been lately, and you've just rolled with the punches lately, and you've just done the hard things. Well, the same way is with teaching on a cart. If you are asked to do this, then you're like, instead of saying, oh my gosh, I don't have a way to play music, or I don't have my instruments, or I don't have a space for kids to do movement activities, you're just going to have to adapt and adjust. And that is what you're going to need to do. But aren't music teachers used to doing that anyways? And what I want to say about that is just, if you are teaching on a cart, be grateful that you're getting to see your kiddos in person. You're actually still able to teach them music in person, even if it's not the way you were trained to even do as a music teacher or as a music education major, but you're still able to teach them in person. So it'll be completely awesome to be able to see any of your kiddos in person instead of just virtually or sending home paper packets, which we'll talk about in a minute. Okay, so like I said, you're going to need to adapt your instruction to fit with social distancing protocols, like no instruments. We've already mentioned that. But also, I know right now, I'm seeing all over the interwebs, is singing. There's a lot going around about kiddos not being able to sing next school year because of spreading germs with their mouth, obviously. So, like I said, listen to what the CDC is saying. Listen to what your principal is instructing you to do, and then follow those guidelines. If your kiddos are allowed to sing, make sure they're standing a distance apart that they're supposed to. And instead of standing right next to each other, have them face out where they're facing different walls and singing to those walls away from each other and not singing side by side. If they're not able to sing, there's so many other creative ways kids can create music. Is it ideal? No. Do kids need to sing in elementary music? Of course they do. So you're just going to have to come up with a whole lot more technology, movement in place activities, body percussion, which we talked about earlier. Read them stories and do creative movement, or have them listen to the stories. There's so many creative music things. Even on the smart board, there's so many creative music things you can do that don't involve singing. You just have to be creative. You look at the lesson plans you already have that you did with your kiddos and look and say, okay, this is a song. Is there a way maybe I could be the one singing it, and maybe you have to sing with a mask on, and the kids, while you're singing it, maybe they follow the melody with their hands. Maybe while you're singing it, they're doing motions to the words you're singing. Maybe you're the only one singing, but the kids can still do stuff to the song, even if you're the only one singing it. Maybe you even instruct the students, okay, you're not supposed to sing at school, but what I want you to do is what we're going to do to this activity is I'm going to sing, you're going to move in place at your desk, and then when you get home later today, I want you to practice singing the song the way I just did it. That is a way you can be creative with still teaching music and still instructing your students to sing, maybe just not in the classroom if it gets to that point. All right, so let's move on to the next point. Maybe you're just asked to teach virtually. Okay, aren't you like an expert in that by now? Don't you feel like you could completely just teach a class about how to teach music virtually at this point? And maybe you don't, and that's okay too. But the first thing I want to say about teaching virtually is one of the main things right now in the last couple months, like I said, I'm recording this in May, is just the comparison game is, not everyone's doing this, but not everyone's, when I say comparing, I see teachers in my own community, my online community is what I'm referring to, they have a plan in place. They're going to use this technology. They figured it out. They got all their students in there. They got it set up. They're ready to go. They have their first meeting with their students scheduled. And then they see someone post something about another technology they're using. They're like, oh, maybe I should be doing that. So then they start creating that. And then they're sending both links to the parents, and the parents are overwhelmed. Like, well, which one do we do? And then it just gets overwhelming for everyone involved, right? So let's talk about that. How do you choose what to use? How do you not use too much? How do you not use too little? How do you make sure you're doing the right thing? How do you make sure you're not overwhelming your students in the process? And how do you make sure you're okay with only a couple kids coming to your calls as well? Let's talk about all of that. Okay, so first of all, I took notes on a couple things. There's Google Classroom. They have, a way to chat. There is Zoom, of course, Flipgrid, Canvas, Class Dojo. Oh my gosh, you guys, I could go on and on. There's so many. So how do you choose what to use? Well, first of all, the way I have always figured out how to use different things is just by getting in there and doing it. Asking questions, playing around with the features, seeing if there's a way to, a free trial or is there an example of another one that someone's used, and how did they set it up? How easy was it to set up? How well was the student experience? Like I said earlier, what am I comfortable using? Because you don't want to spend all your time creating something in a techie thing. I can't think of the word I'm trying to say. And take all your time doing that. You want to focus on teaching your students. You want to focus on ease of use, just getting in there and doing the dang thing. Getting in there and creating your lessons and recording yourself teaching and interacting with your kiddos, and not just spend all your time just focusing on getting it going. Just get it going. The simpler, the better. You guys listening to this, you may or may not know, of course, I have a podcast, but I have a whole website. It's been going for 4 years now. That was the best advice. I took a course I paid for, and it taught me all about running an online business. And one of the things they said, everybody was asking about that. What platform should I use for my website? What should I use for my blog? What should I use for my podcast? What should I use for my membership site or my course or my this? And everybody was like, just get in there and do it. Just get going. Get going, and you'll figure it out as you go. And I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense. I want to know how to do all the things. I want to know the best option, this. But you know what that causes? It causes you to delay. It causes you to not just get in there and do it. Because the best learning is just by getting in there and doing it. And then you'll figure out what you like. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, so for the fall, when I was back in April and May, when I tried Flipgrid, I did not like it. So I'm going to switch to Google Classroom. That's how you learn things. You just get in there and do it. Think about your students. Do you sit there and just explain lessons all the time, or do they get up and experience music? Right? It's the same way for you as a music teacher. Just get in there, even with technology, even if you're like the least technological, is that how you say it, savvy person in the world. Just find what works for you. Find what works for your students. but you're also going to have your administration, your comfort level, and what your students need as a deciding factor as well. Don't try to do it all. Okay. And one thing I want to say too is, let's say you only have had, back in April and May, only 2 students coming to your calls you've set up. You worked so hard at creating these lessons, and you're going to teach them live, or you've recorded a lesson and you can see who's watching them. And you see 2 students out of a class of like 25 to 30 watching it, and you're feeling defeated and you're like, what is going on? Well, if I can be completely honest, from the parent side of things, we're so busy over here. I'm homeschooling 3 boys and running my own business. And when it comes time for learning opportunities, we are sometimes just barely getting by. Our day is so jam-packed full of everybody having different meetings to be at different times. Sometimes it's either we forget, or there's no time in our day, or there's a conflicting time where someone needs to be on the computer for their class call, and then there's a music or art call at the same time, and it's just not possible. Sometimes there's been times where my husband and I both have a Zoom call at the same time, and we don't have time to rush down there and get our kiddo on a call. You have to think about the parents too. If you're teaching virtually, you have to think about the parents who A, either don't have technology, or B, don't know how to help their kids with technology, or C, they're working parents from home and it is just crazy busy, and there's just like, they feel like they're drowning trying to keep up. And so one thing that I suggest to music teachers, I even suggested this in my membership site last week, the Harmony membership site, was to join the regular classroom teachers' calls when you can. Try to find out, what are they using? When are your calls? Could I join your call? Maybe not every week, but maybe every once in a while. You hop into one of these classroom calls and you just make yourself available. Maybe you don't have a lesson planned, but you just show up just to say hi to these kids. Or think about all the episodes I just did about music integration. Maybe you integrate some ideas with reading, or you're just reading a book to the kids and you're telling them, hey, listen to the movement words in this book or the action words and move to what it's telling you to do. Maybe you're doing a math rap like we talked about. There's science, social studies. We just went through all those episodes. You can look back on the podcast for those. But maybe you're doing music integration ideas. Maybe you ran out of ideas to do. And so come the fall, maybe you're starting up the school year, if you're teaching virtually, with new ideas for integrating music, but you're working hand in hand with the classroom teacher and you're showing up to their calls as well. They're going to have things to teach as well. But a lot of times what I've noticed from my own experience with my own kids is the regular classroom teachers a lot of times just use the Google class calls and the Zoom calls just to communicate and have class conversations. And so maybe during the class conversations, you use the last 10 minutes of that call to do something musical with the kids. Maybe it's not music integration. Maybe you have a whole lesson. Maybe you have a song planned, or you just dance with the kids, or you talk about what music they've been listening to. Sometimes it doesn't all have to be formal. And I know there's so many objectives to get through, and there's so many things that you want to do with your students. And if you're teaching virtually, it's so hard. But you have to remember too that the best way to connect with the kids right now is just to try to connect, is just to keep showing up. And in the fall, if you're still teaching virtually, to keep just showing up for them as well, to not beat yourself up if only like a couple kids are coming to your call, but just to do the best you can. Just you provide ways for the kids to learn music, and you kind of got to let go of the rest because it's out of your control. So just like in your classroom, when you were not able to use every teaching resource or lesson plan ever created, like all the different things you learned at every workshop and Orphan Kodaly level, and from the teaching resources you've purchased, there's no way you can get through everything. Well, the same is online. When you're creating lessons to teach virtually to your students, don't try to get through everything. There's no way. So just pull some of your favorite activities that your students would enjoy learning online too and do that. All right. So make a list of pros and cons about the different technology platforms. What do you want to use? Why do you want to use that? What's the pros and cons of them? And then get started. Just get in there and do the dang thing, and you'll figure it out as you go. Okay. Let's move on. Let's talk about the next situation you might find yourself in the fall. Maybe you are teaching in person, but you only have a few kids at a time. Maybe the class sizes have been not only cut in half, but in thirds. And you're not only wondering how to teach a small group of kids, but maybe you're now only seeing your kiddos every 2 weeks instead of every week. And you're like, How am I supposed to do this? How am I supposed to get through all my lesson plans if I don't see the kids as often as I used to? Well, here's what I want to say to that. You're just like we talked about adapting your lesson plans, whether you're teaching on a cart or teaching virtually, you're going to be adapting your lesson plans and being okay with not getting through everything. So I'm going to remind you again, the main goal is to teach music and to keep showing up for your students, whatever that looks like for you. You might need to adapt your instruction also based on social distancing guidelines. So look at your lesson plans and then go through your class time front to back. What I mean by that is, maybe you're used to having a 45-minute class period. Maybe you still do have a 45-minute class period if you're seeing your students in person, but there's only half of a class coming to you. But now if you're only seeing them every other week, maybe you started class with a warm-up, and then you reviewed an activity, and then you did the meat of the lesson, like the main content, and then you did some kind of closing activity every single time you saw your students. Well, look at your lesson plan format. There's two ways you can do this. One, still do that format, but cut in half the teaching material that you're doing this school year coming up. So let's say you have, I'm just going to throw out a random number, okay? 10 songs that you used when it was time to teach rounds. And now that you're only seeing your students half of the amount of time, you're like, well, now I know I'm only going to be able to do 5 songs of rounds. Or you do 5 songs with your kiddos and then you send 5 home for them to learn if they're doing half virtual, half in your classroom. So that's the first way, is to do the same lesson plans you did last school year, but now you are doing only half of the material. Okay. And you're like, well, how do I choose that? I like everything I taught. Well, you just do. You just kind of go, you know what? I'm really kind of disappointed I'm not going to be able to teach this particular activity, but I just can't. I'm going to take, you just say, you limit yourself to how many activities you can do per objective, and you pull lessons based on that. Don't worry about getting through everything. Don't worry if it looks different than every other school year has. Don't worry if these third graders coming up didn't get to do all the materials the previous third graders have done. They're not going to know. They're not going to be worried about it. Just you are, because your heart is kind of hurting for the fact that it's going to look different. So that's the first way to do it, is the same teaching format that you've always done from start to finish of a lesson, but just cut the content in half. The second way to do it is to completely cut out your warm-up and your closing activity and fit in double the amount of teaching things you're doing in a lesson. Okay. Listen back all the way. And you guys, I feel horrible for not having podcast episodes ready, but I'm just kind of throwing these out as I record right now. So there's some lesson plans I did all about lesson planning and how to format a lesson. If you scroll back through the podcast, you will see those. So listen to those for how I talked about formatting a lesson. But basically in that lesson, I talked about, like I just said, a warm up, you review, then you get into the meaty content of the lesson, you do some kind of closing. So if you're cutting out the warm up and the closing, and maybe you're even cutting out a review activity, so then you're allowing time for you to teach 2 songs or 2 activities or 2 games or 2 movement activities or whatever it might look like. That might be another way to think about it too. Okay. So you're going to sit down, think about, okay, let's say I am teaching in person, but I'm seeing half of a class. Maybe they're coming half the time to school and half the time they're still virtual at home. How am I going to make this work? Okay, I could teach this song and then I'm going to give them another round, and I'm just going to use it as an example again because that's what's on my brain. Then they could do this other round at home, or I'm going to teach them this song with a movement activity, and then I'm going to tell them, hey, here's another movement activity that's really similar to this one that I want you to do at home, and sing this song that has similar pitches and a similar melody at home too. That way, they're still learning similar things. And will the kiddos necessarily do what you're sending home? And we're going to talk about paper packets in a minute. Maybe not necessarily, but even if they're not, you have done your part as the teacher in providing the material for them to learn. And that's all you can do. You have to let go of the rest. Okay. So let's talk about this. A few more things in this. How will you need to adjust the activity? So when we talked about when you're teaching on a cart going into the classroom, you're probably going to have guidelines placed upon you for what your students are allowed to learn. Not allowed to learn. I mean, like modifications you need to make, adaptations you need to make because of the CDC guidelines is what I'm trying to get at. So how will you need to adjust an activity? Are you going to be able to play any games? Are you going to be, if you do, will the students need to stand away from each other? Are they going to just not be able to touch hands? Are they going to have to stand 6 feet apart? Are you going to need to put like tape on your floor in circles and that's where the students stand in and so they're not next to each other? Will students need to sing with masks on, facing away from each other, or not at all? Are they going to be able to play instruments or just need to do body percussion? Just like if you went into their classroom, are they going to need to just be doing body percussion if they're in the music room? Are you going to be able to do movement activities at all? And if you do, are they going to have to wear gloves? Or are they going to just need to move individually in their personal space? These are all things to consider too. And actually, I forgot to say one thing about a cart. I got asked this question the other day. They said, well, what if my music classroom, if the kids are only coming to school like half of a class, what if my music classroom is being used now as a classroom, for instruction from a general classroom teacher? And where do I store my stuff? And like, let's say you don't have any storage space in your classroom. Well, one thing I suggested was kind of ask a lower and an upper elementary teacher if all the lower grades are in the same hall and if all the upper grades are in the same hall, depending on the format, the structure of your school building, maybe you have 3 or 4 hallways, designate one teacher from each hallway, and maybe you keep a few instruments, if you're allowed to use instruments, or teaching resources in those classrooms. So instead of having to tote everything around all over the place, then maybe you already have things just ready to go in those classrooms. Maybe you're saying, hey, I'm not allowed to use drums, but can I keep these in here? And you ask another teacher, hey, can I have a shelf in your room to keep these little rhythm instruments on? You ask another teacher, hey, I need a place to store my xylophones. Do you have any extra space in your room? And then they can even cover them up so students aren't tempted to play them, okay? It's just going to be some conversations that need to happen in your school for everybody to work together and to help you out so you are able to still teach music effectively. But if they're taking your classroom, then they need to understand that they're going to need to help you out a little bit. Okay. And if all else fails, you may end up needing to just store instruments at your house for a while until you're able to take them back to school. Yes, that might mean several trips back and forth from school to home, but eventually you'll be able to figure it out. It's just going to have to be getting going and figuring it out as you go, just like everything else. Okay, so let's talk about the last thing is paper packets, the dreaded paper packets. Okay, so raising your hand as you're listening to this, how many of you have been doing paper packets from, in the spring, the end of the school year? How many of you have enjoyed that? Oh my goodness. Okay, so the paper packets is something that a lot of teachers have told me that they're sending home with students. Back to this. I want you to first, I just keep saying this point over and over because I want you to hear me. You are creating ways and providing ways for students to learn music. Do you know if they're actually doing the activities you send home? Maybe not. But are you doing your part? Yes. You are providing ways for them to learn music at home. And they may never even do one of the activities you send home, which is a little disheartening, isn't it? It's so sad to not know who is doing anything. But I want you to know that you are doing a great job. And I know it's exhausting. I know it's like, gosh, I've made all these paper packets. There's probably kids that haven't even done it at all. It's so frustrating. And so what can you do? Well, think about back in April and May, you probably really quickly had to develop these paper packets, right? You had to really quickly develop things for your students to do at home without even having time to really think through it. It was super last minute. Let's be honest, schools sometimes closed in 2 days and you were literally making copies of anything you could get your hands on in 2 seconds flat. It was insane. So think about it this way. This summer, you're going to have so much more time to go through and think about. I'm all about reflecting on last school year to think about this school year coming up. I'm so big about that. It's one of my favorite things to do in the summer. So when it comes to paper packets or teaching virtually or teaching in person or whatever else your situation is going to look like in the fall, process through it. So with the paper packets, what did you send home that you liked sending home? Did you get any response and feedback from parents? Did any of the teachers say that their students on their class calls said anything about the stuff you sent home with music? Did your administrator have any remarks about what you sent home? Then look at what you would like to send home differently in the fall. Now that you'll have more time to plan it out and figure out what you want to do you need to simplify things? Did you maybe send home too much? Did you not send home enough? Whatever it looks like for you, because like I said, your teaching situation is your teaching situation. It's always going to look different than anyone else because you have a unique set of students. You're a unique teacher. You know what you need to send home to your kids. So if your school is still going the paper packet route, still just create the best music instruction for your students. Like I said, it's really disheartening not being able to see your students make music or hear them, but knowing that you've done your part in providing valuable music instruction is key. Parents will appreciate you helping provide ways for their children to create music as well, even if it's not in the formal school music setting. Just do what you can and let go of the rest. And I want to tell you that even though you can't hear or see students creating and making music, if you're sending home paper packets, trust that what you have taught them in ways that you have given them to make music at home, that they are singing. Just trust that they are doing movement. Trust that they are creating music at home with their families. If anything, I think it's an amazing opportunity for kids to bring music education awareness to their families and to advocate for music education because of all the music activities they're doing at home. Maybe their parents hear them singing a song or tapping their legs to the steady beat and they're like, what are you doing? What is this? Oh, your music teacher does that? Wow, that's awesome. Show me your songs that you're singing. And they just start singing together as a family. Of course, you don't know that sometimes, right? Unless someone's telling you, but think about all the ways, because you've taught music to your students, that they are able to bring that love and joy in music to their families at home. But on the flip side of that, let's talk about one more thing. I want you to think about the families you are working with, because let's be honest, you're not just working with kids at this point, but you're working with their parents and their families, okay? So where can you focus your attention on helping students love music? Can you encourage parents to help their kids learn music by maybe providing YouTube links to do at home, or providing song suggestions on Spotify or Pandora? Maybe some shows and movies that have music that the kids could even sing along to? Maybe you could provide ways for them to do simple movement activities at home. Even just teach the parents how to do freeze dance. It's a simple game where you just stop the music and the kids freeze. Maybe you send home something that tells them how to use household items like Tupperware containers to create rhythms, and online music websites their kids can create music on, like Crumb Music Lab is a great one. My boys love that. So remembering the goal here is for kids to experience music. Yes, it's going to look different than it would in the classroom in a normal setting. Yes, it's not going to be like you normally would start the fall. And yes, your situation may be overwhelming, and maybe you're just having thoughts right now of, gosh, I barely got through this last couple months. I don't know if I want to do this again in the fall. But I fully believe that you having a plan in place, organize your emotions, organize your thoughts, figure out what lesson plans worked and what didn't, and then go through each plan we talked about here to really think about how you can apply what we talked about to your particular teaching situation. I think if you just have a plan in place and have the right mindset, then you'll feel so much better in the fall. You're not just going to be thrown in there like it feels like you just went through a blender. You're going to have a couple months off to really think about it, process it, and get in there and do it. So I hope that you got something from this. I hope that this episode helped you. Tag me at Jessica Presta on Instagram and let me know. And I really am cheering you on as you continue teaching music. And I really want you to have a great summer. Try to take some time for you. Try to, even if you just take like a week or two off just to mentally decompress from all the stress that has happened, do that. Then jump in and start planning out your school year, because you're going to have a great fall no matter what your teaching situation looks like. Hang in there, keep teaching music to your students, and I'll see you soon. Thank you so much for listening in to the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, I would love for you to review the show and leave a rating on iTunes. To find out more about how I can help you gain momentum in your elementary music teaching career, head to thedomesticmusician.com, where you'll find free downloads, courses, the blog, and so much more. Continue teaching music and never doubt the impact you're making each and every day in the lives of your students.